Hey everybody, and welcome to Global Badass Goddess, and I'm Glenda. Today we're speaking with Chris Grainger from London via Los Angeles. We're so excited to have him here. I just wanted to share a little bit about him. He's an innovative, intense drummer. He has shown an affinity since he was the age of 4, to playing music. Throughout high school, he had his own band. He worked with James Leach, later with it's an extreme metal band called Skiff. Is that right?
Six.
Yes. See if I said it right. And then he played in London throughout his whole career. So we're lucky to have him here. And just to name a few other artists that he's worked with, there's a gentleman named Dave Buck Colwell, Rick Willis from Foreigner and Bad Company, Small Faces, just to name a few. And in 2012, Brian May from Queen actually asked you to back his band up. So that's amazing. And we're just really excited for you to be here. So thanks so much, Chris, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, I think it's really interesting because I was kind of looking through your bio and everything, and your dad, Gary Granger, he was a guitarist, and he also did a lot of session stuff, gigs, in London for like Roger Daltrey, John Entwistle, Pete Townsend, Ronnie Wood. That's amazing. I mean, what is it like being around that royalty of that, of that industry? What was your experience?
I mean, I've never known any different. It's an interesting thing growing up in that. And, the main thing, the biggest thing my dad did was he wrote and toured with Rod Stewart for a number of years from, I think 76 to 81. And during that time, I was conceived and born. And, I really thoroughly believed that I was hearing a lot of, especially the low end of drums in the room. My mum was there at every show that my dad was doing around the world. He was doing a lot of world tours at that point.
Yeah.
And, if I think about what I would have heard at that point in my life, it's just all the low end. So I have a good guy called Carmine Apiece to thank for that. Yep. Vanilla Fudge, Rod Stewart, great drummer. Very lucky to have him as a good friend still today.
Yeah.
And his drum solo is 20 minutes every night. Were probably coming through to me in the womb. So
that's amazing.
That was one of the first things that I can possibly think of that influenced me. And everywhere I went at 2 or 3 years old, I was I go to my aunt's house or even at home. Pull out the pots and pans, find some chopsticks, and then eventually my parents relented and got me. First of all, at 3 years old, I had a full miniature scale guitar, and then followed up at 4 years old. My dad's quite good at delegating, so he sent my mum out. You would think the musician would go and buy the drum kit, but no, he sent my mum out in a London taxi cab and said buy a small drum kit for him. Well, she was kind of used to what a drum kit looked like. She didn't buy a small size drum kit. She bought a large full size drum kit.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God.
And just not as many parts.
Wow. So it was like just right away you were like drums. It wasn't like, no, I wanted to play bass or I wanted to play guitar. It was like, no, drums.
I mean, I'm still a guitarist, and I studied piano as a kid, and I had a diverse musical education and just grew up with that. But for me, as a profession, drumming is the thing that really feels in tune with me. And growing up, you ask about the experiences. I remember being 6 years old and in the studio with Roger Daltrey. They're recording an album, and I think it was Tony Beard, great drummer who English moved to New York. I was in the Stone Room at Maison Rouge Studios with all the drums, and I remember playing them at a small age, and all of those things really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Along the way. Really grateful to be out sitting on a lot of rehearsals with my dad as well. That was, a lot of people, they go to their local teacher and the guy brings out the book, and, you learn all of the rudiments, which, are very important. And it's still what I do every day, myself now. But I really got firsthand in the studio and in the rehearsal rooms what would be needed of me and how I'd need to conduct myself.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
You know. So yeah, no,
so not only
a very privileged position, but
kidding, that's amazing. I mean, so not only did you were influenced by the greats around you, and your dad was playing all the time, but you got kind of like firsthand like teaching and everything. It's like that's so awesome. It's brilliant.
It's a really fortunate thing that pretty much all of my favorite drummers are guys that my dad worked with. Yeah. And it's not just because they were the people that I knew. They are some of the world's greatest drummers. So I just had that very fortunate thing, and thank goodness most of them are very nice people, who worked along the way that really helped me out, and were very free with their time with me, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's lovely. That's lovely. So tell me about the Age of 8 and the Who tour.
Well, that was the big thing that really, I'd actually, my dad, bless me, such an amazing guitarist, and he knows so many amazing things on the instrument. He'd love nothing more, and throughout my life, to be able to impart everything he knows on me. But I would have been 8 at the time, and I went out on that 1989 Who reunion tour and got to go to sound check, and that was a very exciting thing for an 8-year-old to do. And
yes.
It was a very exciting thing that got even more exciting when the drummer Simon Phillips, an incredible drummer, another London guy who moved out to LA, he's a local guy here, and as soon as he played his drum kit with the Who's deafening PA, back then they were so loud,
right,
in an empty Wembley, I was just, at that moment, that cemented it, because I started playing quite a bit of guitar at 8 years old, learning quite seriously, and then when I heard Simon on that kit and the power of it, that was really what got me. And since then, my whole life's mission is to disturb air molecules on a on a large scale.
Send the lower frequencies our way. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So tell us, what was the most exciting moment of your life in music?
Whoa, put me on the spot there. I mean, I can't say exciting because they all have their different nuances, really.
Yeah.
I can tell you 2 things that really stuck with me. The first one, good friend of my dad's, who I'd known all of my life and who was wonderful to me. He's the guitar tech for the creme de la creme of every guitarist. Pete Townsend, that was my link to be on stage during sound check at the age of 8. It's this guy, Alan Rogan. And Alan was with the Who since the mid-70s. People you wouldn't have heard of that he worked with, like Joe Walsh from the Eagles, right, Tom Petty, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, the Stones, any major guitarist, especially English ones, this guy did it. Now, he was gracious enough, to have a very young and green version of me in his band that he had called Blues Club. And in my late teens, I joined Blues Club, which was Alan's band. And
this is in London, right?
This was in London, yeah. Mainly based around Richmond and Twickenham, where a lot of the, classic rock guys lived in the music industry. Yeah. And the preceding 2 drummers for me, I was a young teen, and Alan was very nice to let me follow on from Mick Avory from the Kinks, and
very cool,
Chris Blade, who was in AC/DC, Tom Jones, you listen to him on Blinded by the Light by Manfred Mann, these are big guys, and Alan in. And sadly, it's almost exactly a year to the day that Alan actually passed. I was kind of reflecting, and I think the most enjoyable time that I've ever had on stage has been in the band with Alan, because he was so funny. His reactions and his moments that we shared on stage, those are definitely the most enjoyable things I've ever done. And, these weren't to 5,000-6,000 people, big crowds that I've done. This is like small things for fun. And, although, did some large festivals, but the smaller gigs are the ones that really mean a lot to me that I did with him, because the interaction of it and those memories and his humor, that he could, raise an eyebrow or give me a look. And that was the amazing thing. The other thing that really springs to mind is, we all as musicians have a certain amount of non-verbal communication on stage. And it's an interesting thing that, I think that I can tap into quite easily. And you see with the really great musicians how non-verbal they can be. And you can have a communication entirely through the notes you play or the intensity that you play them at. And it springs to mind Brian May from Queen, the first time I played with him. That was huge, because his ability to react to what's going on, and through no words or no rehearsal, things to come together so organically, he was second to none. I mean, I have that kind of connection with my dad when we play, and lots of other musicians, but that was a large impact with Brian, that I was like, wow, like he could play something, and without any thought, organically, I was going where he was going with what he was playing. And likewise, I could throw something out to him, and he'd be playing the same, rhythmic and harmonic figure with what he was doing. So to me, those are the, I guess if I have to cap it up, is those kind of non-verbal things. Right. Those are the things that really stick with me. That matter the most to me. Really.
It's like it's a different level of language. Right, between each other. And especially the longer you play with somebody, oh my God, you breathe, and that you don't even have to be paying attention, you just know. So I totally get that. That's phenomenal, actually. And at the same time, it's if you're an artist or a musician, what you're talking about. It's like, oh yeah, of course, it's that's nothing weird or anything.
It's where we will aspire to get to, really, is that effortless place. Or, in my case, there's one particular gig that I remember doing with the English punk band, The Jam. I wasn't really playing the gig. I was enjoying watching myself play the gig. It was so organic, and it was so, not to sound, like narcissistic or too, but it was a really nice, effortless. There's one show that we did in London, and the crowd was really into it, and we were just really together as a band, and it just felt completely right that I was kind of my own fan that night. I was enjoying seeing it come together rather than thinking about it. I'd gone to a different place.
Yeah. So did you had a lot of rehearsals, or you just been with them for a long time, or?
At that point, I'd been there for a couple of years.
Okay.
We didn't really over-rehearse though. If we hadn't gone on a run for a while, we'd get together, maybe do the set maybe once or twice.
Right.
We really didn't over-rehearse it. But,
it's like riding a bike.
It was a pretty active band. So it was just keeping the momentum going. Really. Yeah. And, do
you have any specific like mentors or people that that have really deeply influenced you in your life?
I mean, really, everything that I had available to myself, I tried to engage with, and because I was, especially as a kid, so passionate about it, I never missed an opportunity. As I say, the ability to be a fly on the wall for days in rehearsal rooms with great drummers like Zach Starkey from the Who, or Simon Phillips, another Who thing. But a lot of these guys, that was so informative for me. Even just simple things like I don't know how they tuned their drums, or what they did, or how they counted in a song, or something so simple that were great clues for me about how to be a supportive musician for other people. I do need to highlight though, there was a guy, Jimmy Copley. He was the drummer with Go West, Tears for Fears, Jeff Beck, big session guy in London. But he was wonderful to me. He started playing with my dad in the late 80s, early 90s. And actually, I've got it right here. When I was a kid, he gave me a drum key that I still keep on a lanyard.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Jimmy was so great to me, and so supportive, and just he's an East London boy, this Cockney, lovely guy. Another guy, sadly, we lost way too early. In a couple of years since we lost him, and he was very supportive, and always I could just ring him up and grill him. You know, it was a very fortunate position to have those kind of people that I could, as a kid, pester. And they were cool with it, and I'll forever be grateful for that. And then the other great guy that I can really single out that probably turned me from being an okay gigging drummer, who was competent, to another level, I hope, was a guy called Thomas Lang. And, within drumming circles, he's a superstar. Within musician circles, that kind of thing, he's huge. But, the average person may not know, but his resume of the people that he's worked for over the years, second to none. Thomas, I was, once again, real great luck, he moved from Austria to London in the mid-90s. My cousin, who's a fantastic guitarist, he's 8 years older than me, Simon, he'd run into Thomas on Thomas's first gig in London in a small pub. And my cousin comes to me one day and goes, "This guy, forget everyone else, this guy is a monster. You've got to check him out." I was like, yeah, whatever. I'm into this guy, I'm into that guy. And my cousin's like, "No, this guy, like, he blows everyone else out the water." I was like, yeah. And, as it happened, I got hold of Thomas's first album, Mediator, great album, and listened to that. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah." And fortunately, he lived 3 or 4 miles away from my place in London. And that started, I think I was 19, I started some lessons with him. Because largely to that point, I was pretty much self-taught up until, I was gigging from 14 years old.
Amazing.
And I was out doing it. But I hadn't really had formal education.
Yeah.
And rightly or wrongly, I developed, some unique things and some nice, organic styles of my own. But
cool.
What was missing was some tuition.
Sure.
And all of my other friends went off to university, and I did 6 years with Thomas.
Wow.
And another guy living in London now lives very close to me here in Los Angeles.
Oh my God, that's great. That's so awesome.
The mass drummer migration. Yeah.
Wow.
So
do you think that did you learn more like finesse, and what did you learn with the 6 years working with him?
Well,
dynamics.
You it's an interesting thing that I'd never really thought of until you've asked me these questions. But watching people from afar, as I did in my non-formal music education of going to rehearsals with my dad and watching some of the world's best drummers play, what I didn't really get to learn is just to sit down and hold a drumstick properly so it wouldn't hurt me, and things like that, and really learn fluid motion. I was very sort of rigid and stiff. And to be honest with Thomas, he had the the non-gratifying job of stripping away years worth of work
that I put in.
And make me a drummer that could survive on tour, because that's right. Those things, if you're hurting yourself every night, or you're stiff, especially, I think you can get away with a lot when you're in your teens, but as you approach in your 30s and things, doing it every night on the road, you've got to be very robust with the correct technique. And so that was one of the main things. Thomas is known as this beast of a drummer who is incredible with his double bass drum playing, so fast, his independence, and all the rest of it. But really, some of the best things I learned from Thomas, and once again, he was very gracious to invite me to local shows that he'd play in London. Some of the best things I learned from him would be like watching him play Sex Machine by James Brown, and watching him play like an incredible groove,
right?
Effortlessly. And it's one of those things that I think the music community maybe doesn't see so much about Thomas's is incredible musicianship and sensibility towards groove, and all of the technique goes into the music. A lot of people focus on the technique because it's impressive from an athletic point of view.
Yeah.
You know, all of that has a purpose. You know,
Yeah.
if being a highly trained, you know, martial artist or something like that, you can go, oh, isn't it fun when he chops the wooden blocks, or, you know, like, oh, break a brick, you know. But the point is, when you need to use it, that resource is there. And, you know, I think Thomas is one of the highest, you know, one of the most highly accomplished people for that.
Well, I being a musician and artist myself, you know, there's levels to each one of our art forms. You know, you know, you start at the beginning, you learn all the techniques, you know, you got that, but then at some point you learn finesse, you learn to let go, you learn, you know, what's how do you get it? You know, you get to a place where you can let go, so you're in the groove. You are the groove. You know, you are one with it, and people feel it. People experience it. You know, that's why we say, oh, they're great drummers. They may not know why, but they can feel it. The greats.
Yeah.
You can feel it.
It may not be a technique thing. It could be just
Exactly.
something innate that they've stumbled in on. You know, there's great drummers like Simon Kirk from Free and Bad Company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not Buddy Rich in terms of a technique point of view,
Right.
but, you know, some of those songs that he played on are just so good because of the intangible. It's what Simon Kirk would put into those songs that really makes them happen. And, you know,
Are you familiar
hours with books you can't
Right.
do. You know, it really comes from the, I don't know, it's a gift.
Yeah. Do you are you familiar with Tony Franklin?
Yes.
Bass player.
Yeah.
I think he's in LA too.
He is. Yeah, I've been fortunate. He was in a great band with Carmine Apiece.
Yep.
Another one of my big influences. And Tony's a sweetheart. He's a good friend.
So nice. He's
my friend. Yeah.
He is the nicest man. I know we met up a few years back. I had a project that I was going to work on, and he was interested in working with me, and that project did not come to fruition. But he was like so kind, you know, so thoughtful, just super down to earth. Come on in. I think he was playing with Kenny Shepherd. Yep. Kenny Wayne Shepherd, he was in, and I came, and he's like, "Come on," and gets me a seat, and it was awesome. He was amazing guy.
I'll be honest, he's one of those people that I would absolutely love to play with.
Right.
I've been very blessed with bass players in my life. You know, it's one of those things that I've been so fortunate to work with some incredible bass players, and he would be right at the top of the list of people I'd love to play with.
Yep, I agree. I know, I was like, yay. I guess another question I have for you is, what would you tell like artists that are kind of coming up, you know, what would you share with them to do or not to do in the industry, just from your experience?
Well, I think one of the things that's really stood me in good stead over the years is, you know, just being professional about things. You know, I along with my music career, you know, I'm one of those type of people. If you put me in a situation, I'll give you 100% in it. And, you know, during my early 20s, I worked for a retail company in the UK, and ended up working my way to being, you know, in a good position in that company because, you know, I applied myself to it, and I still had the stamina, you know, early 20s to go out until 3 o'clock in the morning, play a show, wake up again at 7 and put in a good day's work after as well, you know, and then go home and practice for 3 hours that night. You know, like I had that kind of, you know, ability back then. And one of the good things though about getting into a, you know, a kind of corporate thing is really understanding some of that about being more professional. Mm-hmm. I've seen people on the road let their emotions get the better of them.
Interesting.
You know, being in immigration and customs at Bahrain airport and throwing a hissy fit with the officials there is probably not, you know, the most professional thing to do. And I've seen a bass player do that, and that was the last time he ever worked with the band because he let his, you know, emotion or his ego really get in the way of making this run of shows in the Middle East that we had be successful. Yeah. You know, for me, one of the things that I don't think I could do it another way, but if I played to thousands of people, or even a rehearsal or a tiny gig, I still go into it the same amount of preparation, and that is the same mindset. So, you know, whether someone's going to hire me to go and do, you know, a tour over many months across the world, or whether they just want me for a one-off show to 50 people, I still come at it with the same attitude. And I guess, as I say, I don't think I know another way of doing that.
Yeah.
And I think that's always stood me in good stead and got me, you know, the respect. I've never really delineated between somebody wanting me for like something prestigious or highly paid with something that's a little less than that, or a different, you know, I'm a working musician, and if you want me to do something, you know, I'll give you that, you know. And if it's a set of circumstances that I don't like, that's not really their problem, right. Aside from berating me or you know, attacking me physically, you know, that's not their problem. That's my problem. I need to change, you know, my decision making or create a bigger opportunity for myself.
Yes,
so,
brilliant.
You know, to a smaller gig and give somebody less because you say, oh, well, this person's not as well known, or, oh, you know, they're not paying me as much as so and so. You know, that's not their fault. You know, they deserve to get all of you and all of your effort. You know,
and you agreed to it, right? It's exactly. Being accountable and responsible. It's like your choice. You said yes, so bring 100%. You know, yeah. I don't care if it's $20 or, you know, like you said, 1,000. You know, yeah. I'm with you. I learned that right away too. I mean, I was a working musician for almost 20 years, and I worked every day except for one day a week, and we were traveling in the van, the bus, you know. And, you know, you have to bring, I don't care if it's first song, first set, you come on, you nail it. I don't care if there's two people there, you know, you're still getting paid, you know what I mean? So I totally agree with that. That is a sweet attitude. It's brilliant.
And, you know, there's something that a lot of, I'm trying to think of the right way to frame this. You know, a lot of, you know, basement, especially drummers, you know, we're a funny lot. You know, those guys who haven't really gone out and done too much, you know, they're very quick to criticize other people, potentially as well if they've been successful. If they're not like such a great technician or something like that, you know, people don't really understand what goes into being on the road. Yeah. And it's very easy, you know, to wake up in the morning, you know, eat your nice breakfast and put on your best outfit and, you know, send a drum performance to YouTube or any kind of music performance to YouTube. But, you know, try doing that after your 60th show with food poisoning in a foreign country and you've lost your phone. You know, some of those kind of things are really what I think separates those in-demand musicians. Because I've seen it a lot. You know, you watch a big performance on, like, the Super Bowl. And I remember particularly watching somebody who I hold as a personal friend and I'm not going to say the name, but, you know, a big influence on me and who did a great job, played on the Super Bowl, incredible. And quite a few drummers were going, oh, well, you know, this wasn't so great and so could have done it better, or I think I could have done better than that. Well, you try doing it.
Thank you.
You try playing the Super Bowl.
Right.
You know, and you don't know what's happened before. Maybe you've had an argument with someone just before you go on stage. You know, bringing that level of performance in the face of adversity, to me, is one of the biggest things that, you know, experience is really the only way through that. And a lot of people can't do it, you know. And I know a lot of great musicians who, you know, tried going out on tour and it's not their place. Yeah. You know. Yeah. And
it's a different beast. It's a different animal. You have to, there's a lot of stuff that come into play. And like you said, I think, and, you know, like taking the example of Super Bowl, I mean, you're dealing with elements now too. You're not in an environment that's enclosed. I mean, stuff could go down, you know, monitors are out. Your your earpieces are ear monitors are gone.
Some of those things, you know, I'll relate to you a set of circumstances. This was once again with the Jam, and you know we're a 3-piece, you know, so there's a vocalist and guitarist and a great bass player and vocalist. So, you know, when we hit the stage, you know, it's pretty full on, and the crowd, especially in England, are off the hook. You know, they are.
Yeah.
And I remember we were playing in Wales, and the drum riser in the stage wasn't very. It had a lot of bounce to it, and I had this big wedge next to me, and the first 3 songs kind of all ran into each other, like there was no break, and the wedge fell on me. So I played the first 3 songs of the show, you know, which is probably 18 minutes or so, with this whole enormous, like 5-foot wedge on me. And I'm playing, and I'm trying to do the whole show.
Oh my
I'm like, nudge it out the way and things like that. And, you know, we finished the show that night, and the other 2 said, oh, like, you're a bit sort of, you seemed a bit distracted in your playing in the first few numbers. You know, you got better after that. But I was like, did you not see? And I'm like, no, we were just in it. I was like, the wedge fell on me, you know. And so just those kind of things, you know, like having to go through those kind of things, you can't prepare for it. But being able to fulfill what everyone else is needing of you in the face of something absolutely ridiculous like this 200-pound speaker falling on you. You know? Totally.
Oh my God. I'm going to share a little story with you. What happened to me? I was in Lake Tahoe, and there's a wooden, the stage was wood. It was like one of these big old theaters, and it was a wood stage. It was kind of glossy. And I had a whole hip hop routine that I used to do, dance, right? And I was right in the middle. I'm singing, and then I start into this hip hop move, and there's like a I don't know what they call it, but you do a scoop with your foot, and I did a scoop with my foot, and I fell, and I went boom, and it was so loud, like the audience turned and looked at me. And I literally rolled and got back up and like acted like it was a part of the thing, but I was so embarrassed at the time. But like you said, you just got to keep going. You can't, you know, stop the song and go, I need to move the wedge, you know.
That's and that's it, you know. That for people who are coming up, you know, you can't the different possibilities of all the stuff that could go wrong, you know. I've fallen off the back of like a 15-foot drum riser.
Oh no! Oh my goodness!
Somebody tried, you know. Oh, that was a good one. We'd had an 8-hour drive that day, and somebody else had tried setting the drums up before me.
Yeah.
And had placed the seat way too far back, and then a curtain behind it. And I sat on the seat, and it just went completely off the back. Stuff like that, you know.
Oh my God!
You can't ever imagine all of the different variables that could go wrong for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, that night you got to be kind of ready for it, or robust mentally.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it. And at the end of the day, it's how do you handle your being? How do you handle the situation?
I think the only tip I was trying to, you know, you were trying to ground it in something as advice.
Yeah.
I think the only advice that I can give at this point is just look after yourself. You know, try, and this is one thing that I was not good at in my early years. You know, is eating correctly, getting the right amount of sleep. I mean, nowadays I meditate, and, you know, all of these different things to give myself the resource to draw on if I do need it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, back in my 20s, man, I ran myself 110%. I was running in the red.
Yeah.
With every resource, you know, and, you know, things like eating and sleeping were optional. You know, I really wanted to keep myself because, you know, life's short, and I really put a lot of effort into everything I did. But nowadays I've seen that if something does go wrong, I've got to rely on that resource of being, you know, rested and, you know, having the right nutrition and, you know, those things that I think get you out of trouble when something, you know, goes as planned.
You're right. So is there another artist that's in another field that inspires you?
Oh, that's a very good question. Another artist. I mean, to be honest, like the people that I from other fields that I appreciate. Generally, you know, I read a lot of books on generally just kind of psychological or sociological issues, and just really, you know, somebody like a Malcolm Gladwell or someone like that I tap into that has something to say.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't really define it as being art. I can say that, you know, they have an art in their field, and just picking up on those intangible things, you know. For me, you know, I grew up with one of England's gold medal cyclists, a guy called Bradley Wiggins. He's a rare person for winning so many medals in the Olympics, as well as winning the Tour de France and all sorts of things. And I look at him, and you know, he was just very very single-minded about what he was doing. He got to a certain age, and then he just sort of disappeared out of our social circle because all he was doing was cycling. And I find things like that fascinating. You know, I've since read interviews from him talking about, you know, he'll have to spend days reserving his energy before a race. You know, like the way that he referred to it was like, you know, dad's on the couch today. You know, like you can't, some of the things that you need to do to get that extra 0.001% better than somebody else. Yeah. I find that kind of thing fascinating for those, you know, whether it's an athlete or something within social or psychological world. Those are the people. I can't really identify one single person because I try to draw on as much as possible. Gotcha. Those are the people that I think, okay, like you're really pushing boundaries there. Yeah. A lot of the Formula One drivers, I love Formula One Grand Prix racing, and I look at some of those people, you know, and just astounded at the level of discipline that they have. Yeah. You know, once again, there is an art to that. There is a zen to. Yes. And funny enough, I was fortunate. I took a lesson with Simon Phillips, the guy from the Who incident in 1989, about a year ago. And bless him, I think it was a bit frustrating for Simon because, you know, I think he was ready to sort of teach a standard drum lesson. But all I really needed to tap into him was you know, a lot of questions that I had for him based around mindset. Yeah. And Simon had done a lot of motor racing in the UK as well. You know, he got into a decent standard. That was his hobby. And one of the things that I asked him was about, what is your process to getting over a mistake live? And that was one of the things that I was like, you know, I had my idea about how I did it, but I wanted to know how someone like Simon, I've seen him, you know, you can rest on being one of the world's finest drummers and make a mistake because people know that you're not a terrible player. Right. But I've seen him play a mistake and he'll smile through it. He'll laugh. And I was like, in that moment, you know, explain to me, what is your thought process? Yeah. And he actually related it back to motor racing, which is interesting because once again, I find that fascinating, that world. And he said, you know, his, I think his team boss or whoever he was working with, a more experienced person, he said, if you mess up a corner on the race, you can't think about that corner. You know, you've done like another 10, 15 laps since then. You're still thinking about that corner. If you do that, you're going to crash. As soon as you mess up that corner, you know, you've only just made a slight mistake. It's not the end of the world. You've just got to carry on because there's a lot more to do. And it's about that. It's about bringing yourself back to that moment of zen. And say there is an art to that. Yes. Finding that stillness of being so present and so, you know, especially with motor racing where your life is on the line. You know, musicians don't have that, where if we drop a few notes or lose where we are in the song, we don't die. You know, so for me, motor racing is an interesting comparison.
That's a brilliant comparison. You know, and it's mindfulness. You know, it's bringing oneself back now, right? Yeah. That's brilliant. That's the
thing. To bring it full circle, you know, you flub something, the audience generally won't notice unless it's terrible. But right. The audience won't notice. But if you're going to spend the next hour and 20 minutes on a gig thinking about that, you are going to be making more mistakes.
Right.
And you are going to be dooming yourself.
You psych yourself out. Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And I think it kind of goes into what I would consider, working on yourself, working on those belief systems or ideals or mental attitudes, because the more you can refine that, like you said, when you're in that situation, you make a mistake, you don't spend the whole hour and a half, right? You just like, no, they don't know. Let's move on, And that's a discipline. You're so right. 100%.
And actually, the overarching thing to that is, within certain areas, it's great to be a perfectionist. And definitely, I was a perfectionist in so many areas. But it was only when somebody told me, actually, being a perfectionist is not a good thing. And that shift of paradigm for me was huge.
Yeah.
So, getting caught up in making a mistake, that's perfectionism as opposed to, what really matters. So, yeah, those kind of shifts.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm with you with that, because I think people that really love their craft and see themselves in that craft for the rest of their life, because that is a part of them. I think we have a tendency to want to be perfect. We want to be that. And I've shifted mine to excellence, because you've got to practice enough to let yourself shine through. Right?
I think you've got to remember at this stage in your career, your excellent is better than almost every other person on the planet, right?
Right.
You may be perfect on some days, but that's only competing with, I don't know, 100 people in the world or something.
Right.
That it's fruitless to actually do that. You're better off being excellent the whole time as opposed to perfect. Right. And being, I'll be honest, I know a lot of musicians, like you'll see them and they'll play like one show and it's so intangible how good they are. But replicating that when the conditions aren't good, once again, we've talked about that. Sometimes the bad gigs are terrible because they've, not slept or, getting into drinking on the road or other stuff, for me, some nights they're catching lightning in a bottle, and then other nights like, oh, are you even going to keep this gig? And that is the truth of it. You're, even if you're just competent every night, you'll still get work,
right.
As opposed to being tremendous 1 in every 10 times.
Yeah. So, okay. So I have another question for you. If there's anything that stops you, how do you get around it? What do you do?
Stops me in what way?
Just like you just get stopped by it. Like, oh, I need to make that. Like for some people, it's like, oh, I need to make that call to see if I can get that gig, but I'm not going to. Okay. And then that stops you from actually having what you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. That is something that I'm an interesting character in that I'm a bit introverted, and especially, making calls and things like that. I'm up on stage. I'm a complete extrovert because I feel completely comfortable, and it's all I've ever known. Since being a small child, I feel completely comfortable up on stage.
Yeah.
But, small things sometimes are a little bit, yeah, you're right.
Right.
The way that generally I get around it, I'm a very visual person, so I like to write things down. Yeah. So that would be the first things. Seeing something tangibly, I actually have, pieces of paper where I've got like a little method. I'm like, these are my options. And generally the first option is always the right option.
Yep.
And it's just your own overthinking that is getting in the way of that. So writing things down really helps me to contain all of the 1,000 ideas that I've got during a day that are jumping around in my head, like a lot of artists, And the other thing that I've always found really helpful, I come from a big family of a lot of cousins, aunts, uncles. My friends that I have, especially my English friends that I've known for a long time, I'll generally turn to counsel. You know, if I hit a block, generally I'll go to them with I won't go to them with a problem. I'll go to them with this is how I think I should deal with this. Yeah. Am I on the right track here?
Brilliant.
That's kind of unfair to just be like complaining to people.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes my close counsel of family, friends, and that'll often be the way that I'll remove a block. That comes to mind. As I'm sure there's other small things that I do, but to me, writing things down and making all of this stuff that's buzzing around my head tangible is number one. And then number two, you know, just having the reassurance that I'm on the right track. Because, you know, I can be a bit, you know, I'm quite a lateral thinker, which is great in some sets of circumstances, but other times, you know, you'll get a trusted friend who'll go, whoa, where'd you get that idea from? Like, you know, like, let's bring this back to center. You know, so I find that is particularly good for me.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And I'm going to leave you now, but I'm going to have one more question before we leave, and I'll let you finish the sentence. If I could.
Okay, if I could. Wow. The list is long. I actually, you know what? And this is actually a bit circular. One of the things that I've identified about myself in some ways very recently is that maybe I don't allow myself to really focus on what I want. And it's a bit circular. So I'd probably say if I could, I'd be able to easily define what I want.
Brilliant.
Because, you know, sometimes, you know, growing up in London, spending a lot of time with my lovely, nurturing, beautiful grandparents who lived through the Second World War, you know, you were not really encouraged so much to go off on big thoughts. You know, it was, you know, security and just indulging on. Now, there's something to be said about really, you know, knowing that you have a roof above your head and that you have your needs met, your vital needs, and that you have great people around you to share experiences with, because those are the most important things. But, you know, if you are of an artistic nature, you know, you think big thoughts. So
True.
I would say, you know, I've been trying to tap into distilling some of the bigger thoughts and believing that I can accomplish them.
Yeah.
So
perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We're going to get
I've really enjoyed this.
I'm going to have you back on again, and we'll continue the conversation. But right now, I want to thank you again, and we'll see all you ladies later. Global Badass Goddess, and we'll talk next time.